Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Pen Fan series. This is a new series of Appelboom after the successful Top 3 Pen series. And in this episode, we're going to have a look at the special guest. But before we're going to have a look, please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you don't want to miss out on a video of our channel or this series. So the special guest of this episode is SBREBROWN. Most of you know him as SBREBROWN on his YouTube channel. He is I think the biggest YouTuber that review pens on the internet. And he's a long-seeing customer of us and actually a good friend of mine. We sent him tons of pens to review already and we will send him many more. So we asked him 3 fountain pen related questions. Let's have a look at Steven.
Hey there! Joost asked me to answer a couple of questions for his interesting new video series, and I said no. And then he said, well, then I'm not sending you any more pens. And then I said, okay, well, then here we go. No, I'm just joking. I think it's a very cool idea. So let's get started. The first question is, what is your top tip for someone using fountain pens? And I would say my first tip is use them for everything. Use them for everything, because I often get the question, what do you use your pens for on my YouTube channel? And that's the answer, for everything. So if you can take them to work, then take them to work and use them there. If you are writing a grocery list, use your fountain pens. That may sound silly, but it's not. By using them all the time, you get to know the strengths and weaknesses of every pen that you own, even if that's just 1 or 2 pens. But I mean, you really get to know what you have. So you may figure out that this pen with a very broad nib is very good for, say, signatures, and this pen with a finer nib is great for note-taking at work or at school or whatever. So I think that's very important. Now, just because I'm me, I'll give you 2 more tips that I found very helpful. One is, when someone says, can I borrow your pen? You say no. Because it is very likely that that person doesn't really know how to use fountain pens. If this is at a pen show or at a pen store or at a pen club meeting, that's different. But if it's at work or at school, you say no. Because that person is likely going to put quite a lot of pressure on your nib and it may bend out of shape. And if that nib is sprung, it's sprung and you can't use it anymore and you have to send it to Annabelle to fix it. So, no. But here's a ballpoint that you can use. That's a good thing. Carry a cheaper pen that you can give to someone if they need a pen. Third and final tip is carry a little cloth. You can purchase glasses cleaning cloths, and those I found very helpful because should there be any accident, a little bit of ink spills on your desk or something, you can quickly clean it up. Or if you're on the road, I've just found that to be very helpful. So a little pen cloth you can put in your pen case or something, that can be very helpful. All right, second question. What is the first fountain pen you ever used? Well, I can't show it to you, but I can describe it. In the Netherlands, when you're in primary school, you enter primary school when you're 4 years old, and when you're 6 years old, you start to learn how to write, and you learn how to write with a pencil. The traditional classic pencil with a little eraser on the back. Not always, actually. Anyway, that doesn't matter, does it? You learn how to write with a pencil, and then the next year, when you're 7, you graduate to a fountain pen. You get a school-supplied fountain pen by the Dutch company Bruinzeel. At least that was the case when I was in school, and I don't know if that's still the case. I went to a very small, intimate, little village primary school where there were only 50 students. So that's kind of funny and completely irrelevant, by the way. But we got our fountain pen, and I was fascinated by it. Now, my handwriting was not very good because my fine motor skills as a young child were not very good. They're great now, but at that time they were not. So I love the idea of a fountain pen. I found it difficult to use. And these are also cheap pens, so they have pretty scratchy nibs. They're not that great to use. But I remember it had a burgundy barrel and a matte chrome cap. And this kind of naturally segues into the final question. So what I found very interesting about using that pen, I distinctly remember having a moment in school where I watched the ink flow from the pen onto the page. And I thought, this is what it means to put a pen to paper. When people say, put your words on paper, this is what they mean. Liquid ink comes out of this pen. And of course, it was a fine nib, and it was I don't even think they were nib grades. I think they're all the same nib, and it was pretty fine, and it was cheap school paper, so the ink got sucked into the paper very quickly, but you could see it dry. It's like watching paint dry. So fascinating. Anyway, I watched that ink dry, and I thought it was interesting, because you could really see the difference with a ballpoint, right? Just write. With a fountain pen, you write, liquid ink comes out of the pen, and that dries up, and then your words are entrusted to the paper, which I thought was very interesting. I had deep thoughts as little SBREBROWN. Anyway, as I said, that segues into the final question, which is, how did you get into fountain pens? Well, strictly speaking, through school. But because I've just explained that, but because my motor skills were not that great, at some point the school recommended, I think I used fine liners for a bit, and then they recommended maybe use a roller ball, and that was dreadful. I mean, that's obviously the instrument of the devil. So that was terrible, but it helped a little bit. And what was interesting is that we fast forward a couple of years now, and it was really in my final years in secondary school and high school. I must have been something like 16, 17. I think it was probably 17. I got back into fountain pens, first with a Parker Vector that I just purchased at an office supply store, and I thought it was kind of cool to have a fountain pen again. My handwriting was still not great, but it was certainly better than it had been in primary school. And I kind of evolved a bit. Then my mother gave me a Waterman, and my granddad gave me a Waterman. These were fairly simple Watermans with steel nibs. But the one my granddad gave me was a hemisphere, and it had a converter, and it came with a bottle of ink. And that was the first time I used bottled ink. And I thought, this is actually pretty cool. Then I used those, and I used those in university throughout my bachelor's, throughout my master's. And then I remember it was 2010. I can pinpoint that year. I'd been using fountain pens at that point. I owned a couple of fountain pens, none of them super fancy, but they were certainly fountain pens. And in 2010, my granddad passed away, and he left me these two pens that I've shown before. But if you're new to me and I haven't bored you to death yet, then I'll show you these pens. They came in this case. It's a Parker 75 Gaudron, I think was the model, and a matching ballpoint. And what's interesting about that is, so he passed away, and he left me those pens, and he had those pens for as long as I can remember, and they were always within sort of an arm's reach for him, and he would always use the fountain pen to sign checks and such, so that was pretty much only used for signatures. And then he used the ballpoint for crossword puzzles. He was pretty much addicted to crossword puzzles, and he always used this pen. And I remember staying over there as a kid, these two pens, in this case, always close to him. And I remember going out with him to buy refills, either cartridges for the fountain pen or actual ballpoint refills for the ballpoint in the local office supply store. So that kind of sparked my interest, because now I had that pen. And during my Christmas break that year, I kind of started to research that pen a bit online, because I wanted to know what model it was and such. And I found a lot of online resources. Brian Goulet's channel, who was pretty much the only person really doing fountain pen stuff online on YouTube at that time. And I started to learn more. I found the Fountain Pen Network, and then I learned more. And then I bought my first real pen. And I say real pen because it has a solid gold nib. It is a slightly fancier material. That's the Visconti Opera Elements. Because my granddad also left me a bit of money, and I thought it would be fun to use some of that towards something permanent that I could have with me forever. And so I bought this. And this, I think, is a very nice pen. 14 karat solid gold nib, very nice nib. And then that was it. Then I was really bitten by the fountain pen bug, and the rest is history. And now, of course, fountain pens on YouTube have exploded. I mean, look at what's happening here, and I think it's great. So I've really discovered a whole community through this, through my YouTube endeavors. We're all united by a love of fountain pens, and I think that is incredibly cool. So that's approximately my story, and that's all I have. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you, Joost, for asking me this. Keep sending me pens to review, please. Otherwise, I have nothing to review. Bye!